Hello everyone, it's David from Automotive Press. Today I have the Jeep Wrangler in the Willys format, and this one is actually the plug-in hybrid. But what I really want to do today is talk about the Wrangler against the potential arrival of the 2025 Toyota 4Runner. That's right, I said 2025 because my speculation is that the next generation 4Runner will come out sometime summer or maybe next fall as a 2025 or even maybe 2026 model. Regardless, what I want to do is try to figure out whether the all-new Toyota 4Runner will indeed be able to compete with this popular and legendary Jeep Wrangler. Because I think that's something that Toyota is trying to do, but yet they might not be able to catch up to the reputation that Jeep has in this industry and in this segment, because Jeep has been around for so long and they built up a very loyal fan base. So let me walk around the Jeep and try to imagine if there was a 2025 4Runner sitting beside it, whether or not it can or cannot compete with what we have right here. Let's go. Welcome back. By the way, I'm going to do this kind of live stream style, so I'm going to keep on talking about the Jeep and also the 4Runner, and I might make a mistake here and there, but I'm going to just apologize in advance. But stay with me because I think this could be a really interesting video to try to figure out whether Toyota can indeed compete in this very important and growing market of true 4x4 off-roaders that are growing by leaps and bounds, starting with the Jeep, but also we have the Ford Bronco, and as you know, Toyota has introduced a new Land Cruiser, but that Land Cruiser is priced higher than these models, somewhat anyways. So I think Land Cruiser is trying to reach to a higher potential market, competing with something like a Land Rover Defender, whereas a 4Runner, I think, will stay more true to what its roots are, which is a true off-roader with a back-to-basic feel, and it should, if my speculation is correct, compete with something more like a Jeep Wrangler and Ford Bronco. And that's probably the reason why they might have delayed the 4Runner and allowed the Land Cruiser to show up first. But anyway, those are some of the speculation that I have. But first, let's take a look at the design of the Jeep Wrangler. This is a classic design, and as you know, we have the round headlights with the vertical slats of the grills, much like as we have seen from Jeep for many years. And some of you guys might know that for 2024 model year, they made some facelift changes, both exterior and interior. This is a 2023 version, but obviously they look very similar. Now, in terms of the 4Runner design, I think it's going to be more like a Tacoma style with a slimmer headlight, not round headlights, and most likely it will not have such a wide grille, but instead it will look more like a Tacoma with some design changes. Those are some of my predictions anyway. So even though the 4Runner might compete with the Wrangler, I think it will try to go into a slightly different segment, a slightly different direction, but really competing with the Jeep in terms of pricing and in terms of the segmentation as well. Now, as you know, the Jeep has a true heritage look, but also things like the latch for the hood. It's got a big plastic wheel wells, and then some important stuff like such as removable doors, so you can remove this door, which is why the power window switches is not on the door, and even the actual windshield in the front, which is pretty well flat, can fold flat if you really need to open up. Now, you can remove this, you can also remove this, and some of these removable tops are what makes Jeep absolutely legendary in this type of market. And so a lot of people are asking me, would Toyota also go that far and make the new 4Runner with a removable rooftop, removable doors, and so forth? And my thinking is that I don't think they'll do that, because they're going to still try to be a little bit more conservative with the 4Runner. Even though design might be closer to something like the Jeep or the Ford Bronco, I still think that they will not have a removable rooftop, but maybe a big panel roof instead. And I don't think the doors will be removable as well. So those are some of the stuff that we're still thinking about. Now, if Toyota decided to make the 4Runner a true competitor to the Jeep and Ford Bronco and make many of the parts removable, that would be absolutely amazing news. But my bets are that they won't do that. Now, the rear tailgate here is also open this way in terms of Jeep, and this one flips open, as you know. And it's not a lot of room in the back, but for 4Runner, it should be a lot more practical because it will be a larger vehicle with a lot more space. Well, obviously I made a mistake here, because if I close this first, I can't close this top. And those are some kind of quirky things about the Jeep that something like Toyota just wouldn't put up with it. They're just too practical and too engineering minded to do that. But obviously this is one of the reasons what makes Jeep unique, right? Because it's very different from a normal vehicle. So this square looking design though, I think is something that we can expect from the 4Runner. because I believe they are going to try to compete with the Jeep and the rest of the models in this segment. So that's most likely what's going to happen. But you know what? I gotta admit, when it comes to the design, you really cannot compete with a Jeep. This is a classic retro design that is not trying to be retro, but it is retro. And if you look at Jeep from many decades ago, it looks the same. If you look at something like a G-Wagon, it's got the same profile with the same kind of feel. Yet the G-Wagon, of course, is $250,000. This thing is about $70,000 Canadian. It doesn't compete in the same market, but people who love the Mercedes G-Wagon or G-Class also love the Jeep Wrangler because they look similar and have the same kind of feel. So I'm really hoping that the 4Runner will become much more rugged, more retro, more classic, even more so than the new Land Cruiser that was just introduced, because I think the Land Cruiser didn't quite go far enough. I know that they're trying to make it look like it's the legendary classic Land Cruiser, harking back to 1980s and early 1990s and 2000s, but I still think the new Land Cruiser looks too modern for it to be considered true retro. Even though I do like the round headlights that model 1958 has in the Land Cruiser lineup. So the big question for the 4Runner is, would they try to become more retro, or would they stay true to the original design of the 4Runner and then keep it more or less same theme or same kind of style? And those are things that are really fun to think about. But coming back to Jeep here, I want to just show you quickly in terms of quality, because it's kind of interesting in the sense that you can't really measure gaps here, because this is actually folding over the front fender, so it's not like you have a gap. I can't put finger in there, but this is a different kind of design altogether. So it's not like I can use my normal measuring stick and try to measure the gap. Although the gaps here and here are actually quite good. I measured earlier, and this is about 3.5 millimeter, which is really good. And this is about 4 millimeters, and this one doesn't have a gap at all because this is part of the design here. And again, here, because this is removable, it's not really a gap. This one is folding over on top of each other, and so I can't measure the gap as well. And the paint quality is pretty good, but there is quite a bit of orange peel, which kind of adds to the character of the Jeep. If I kneel down, I can tell you that the paint job is pretty decent, but there is a fair amount of orange peel, and the sheet metal itself, not quite the same level of quality as what you'll find in the kind of modern SUVs or modern crossovers, because there's a bit of a ripple and a bit of unevenness among the various sheet metals, and that's something that I wouldn't expect in the 4Runner, regardless of the format it might be introduced in. I'm sure that sheet metal, the panel alignment, the gaps, everything will be near perfect, because I expect the 4Runners to continue to be produced in Tara factory in Japan, which is one of the best factories in the world. Coming back to the Jeep here, let's take a look inside and let me see how this might compare to the new next generation 4Runner. Actually, before we go inside the vehicle, let's take a look at the engine here, because what we have is quite unique. It's a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine with an 8-speed automatic transmission, but this is a plug-in hybrid. That's right, it's pretty rare to have a plug-in hybrid 4x4s these days. We own a 2021 RAV4 Prime, which is a plug-in hybrid, so I'm quite familiar with it, but it's amazing to be able to have that in something like a Jeep, because I don't expect Toyota to be able to introduce a plug-in hybrid version of either the 4Runner or Land Cruiser or even the Lexus GX for a while yet. So that means Jeep is ahead of the competition when it comes to its ability to offer something like this. Now the engine is pretty smooth, it's not bad at all, and this 2-liter Turbo 4 is used in other models, so I'm familiar with it. It's definitely geared a little bit more for a truck use, so it's got pretty good low grunt. But because this is a plug-in hybrid, which functions as a hybrid when the battery capacity is low, it has a very different feel from a normal Jeep Wrangler with the same 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. In fact, it has really good pep, and 0 to 60 times are ridiculously fast. I think it's sort of in the 6 seconds range when you are using this, both with electric motor and with the engine. And that is a direction that I don't think that Toyota will go with the 4Runner as a comparison, because the Land Cruiser, which is all new for 2024, has the 2.4-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine with a hybrid. So I suspect that the new 2025 4Runner will have a 2.4-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine as a base model, and then 2.4 with the hybrid as a next step up. but I don't think they're going to offer a plug-in hybrid. So what am I trying to say here exactly? Well, I think the Jeep will continue to have a unique position because it's able to offer plug-in hybrid, but I will also admit that this plug-in hybrid is not ideal. It only has 35 kilometers of range, which is not enough for a good use during the day. You have to plug in pretty well every day. And it's also not quite as smooth as something like in a RAV4 Prime, which is absolutely beautiful vehicle to drive. When it's in electric mode, it is exactly like electric car. Whereas in the Jeep, even in the fully electric mode, I hear all kinds of noise and sound underneath the hood here. So it's not quite the same experience as a crossover vehicle like the RAV4. So I suspect that at some point, if Toyota is able to introduce a plug-in hybrid, that it will be a superior powertrain compared to this Jeep. But my guess is that we're not going to see a plug-in hybrid from TNGA F platform vehicles like the 4Runner, probably not until 2026, 2027. And by that time, Toyota is going to shift into fully electric vehicles. So who knows? They might not even introduce a plug-in hybrid, but they might go straight from turbocharged four-cylinder engine with hybrid and then jump right into EVs. That's sort of a possibility. But coming back to the Jeep here, the transmission is actually very smooth. I do like the torque that we find in this 2-liter engine, and it has been reasonably reliable over time because this engine has been around for a while. So I like the basic setup, and I really like the fact that they're offering plug-in hybrid. But could it compete with Toyota if and when they introduce the plug-in hybrid? That's hard to say, but my bets are that Toyota will have a better system for plug-in hybrid because Jeep needs to work on the NVH, or noise, vibration, and harshness on this engine and powertrain, because it doesn't make all kinds of noise. It's not quite as smooth as what I would expect from a typical plug-in hybrid powertrain. And by the way, this is the port for the charger. So you just plug in as you would any other electric car. But once again, the range is kind of poor. I wish it was more around 50 kilometers or 55 kilometers. But you know what? It's still better than nothing, because if you really want to just use this in fully electric mode, then you can, and you don't have to use any gas at all, except to maybe turn over the fuel tank once in a while, twice a year. You should just use up the gas and refill it with a fresh gasoline so they don't go stale. But other than that, you don't have to use much of a gas, which is a big deal because this type of vehicle does use a lot of gas over time. Now let's finally go into the inside of the Jeep and talk about the Jeep interior, but also talk about the 4Runner interior in terms of what could be happening in a year or so. So now I'm inside the Jeep and I'm kind of in the Jeep mode here. I open up the two tops here, which is pretty easy to remove with one person because it's separate panels, one over here, one over there, and they're not very heavy, although there's limited space in the back, so I had to fold down the seat to fit these two panels. But you can buy a variety of different accessories to store these in the vehicle as well. Either way, when you open it, you can tell that it's open edge to edge. So it's way bigger than if you had like a pana roof or panoramic roof, which can often open pretty wide too, but it will not be as wide and as big as this one. So this clearly gives you the open air feel, and obviously I can remove the back as well. And then if I really wanted to remove the door and everything else, then you have the full Jeep experience, which is not available with anything else out there. Although Ford Bronco can also be configured this way with removable panels, and you can also have that open air feel. So the big question is this what makes Jeep truly unique? Well, it kind of depends on where you live. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we get lots of rain, and obviously wintertime is a bit colder here in Canada, even though Vancouver isn't so bad. So you wouldn't have as much opportunity to open like this. But if you live in warm climate or dry climate where you can leave the top open and not have to worry about putting it back in, this is an ideal configuration for those people who really want the open air feel, but you don't want the convertible and you want to have a 4x4. And this is truly, I think, what makes the Jeep experience and ownership so unique and so different from other SUVs and crossovers. So the question people often ask me is the 4Runner introduction being delayed because they want to make it more openable and to have removable panels? And my answer is that I don't think they will go that far. I really don't think it's in Toyota's best interest to go after a very niche market. So I actually think they will not have removable panels, but who knows? They could surprise us because we don't know exactly when the new 4Runner will come out. And maybe it's not even next year. It could be delayed even further down the road. And maybe they're trying to come up with something that would truly compete with the Wrangler and Bronco by having all the panels removable. And that would be a delightful surprise. But my bet is that it's going to be more of a normal SUV style. and not have the removable panels. So Jeep will continue to have that unique special place in this market, and it's no longer really niche market because they sell tons of this Jeep. And the Ford Bronco, which was expected to steal some thunder from the Jeep, end up selling almost as much as a Jeep, and the Jeep sales didn't go down. So that means they essentially doubled this market, and that means there's even more growth available because people are absolutely loving this type of lifestyle vehicle. And so it would be wise for Toyota to design something with removable panels, but that's yet to be determined, obviously, and we'll have to wait quite a bit of time to find that out. What about the rest of the interior? Well, this is a classic Jeep design. Although I have to admit it is a bit plasticky, as many Stellantis models are. So type of materials looks a little bit cheap. There's nothing wrong with the design. It's actually very easy to use, lots of buttons and controls. So classic design and actually quite ergonomically friendly, but just the materials look a little bit cheap. A lot of hard plastic. And some of that is due to the fact that we have an open top, and so rain will come in and they want to make it easy to wash out and clean out. So that's understandable. But the interior maybe can be improved, which is happening for the 2024 model year. They made it much better, and so that's something that I look forward to seeing. I think Toyota will stay with more of a traditional design, much like what we see in the new 2024 Tacoma. So they'll have a big screen up here, and then a little bit more of a rugged, boxy looking interior, if the 4Runner is indeed going to follow the design theme that we are already seeing in the 2024 Tacoma. Now keep in mind that it is not that easy to remove the door because you do have to disconnect some other stuff in here. So you don't want to take the doors in and out, obviously. It's something you take it out and you leave it out for a while. Everything else is actually pretty good. The big cup holders, pretty decent. Center console here, that's the 2-stage or 2-step. So nice and big, nice and high for my arm as well. Good grip on the steering wheel. And all the controls are here on the steering, but like I said, I really love the fact that they kept all the buttons and not move this into the infotainment system, because that would be disastrous for someone who wants to go off-roading and they don't want to have to fiddle with the screen. So that's something that is an important thing for me, because ergonomics are often ignored in the modern vehicles as they move more and more stuff into the infotainment system and they start eliminating buttons and switches. And that's something that is completely against my engineering philosophy of having things that are very easy to reach and easy to control. Otherwise, in terms of seat comfort, it's actually pretty good. You set up nice and high. The side bolsters are not too bad. It holds you well. And I actually like these cloth seats because they're not as slippery as leather or fake leather. And so I find this to be pretty comfortable. And overall, you sit up nice and high in terms of Jeep, because everything is very vertical, and the windshield is also very vertical, and it's easy to drive. And when you're driving it, it kind of does feel a little bit like driving the G-Wagon, which I just had 3 weeks ago. And I gotta admit, even though that's a vastly superior product with a much more expensive price tag, the kind of general feeling of standing up high and being able to see the road ahead really well is somewhat similar between the G-Class and this one, because they both share the same kind of body profile. Okay, so now I'm taking the Jeep Wrangler for a drive. Obviously, this is not the first time I'm driving a Wrangler, not even the first time I'm driving the plug-in hybrid, because I did review that about 1.5 years ago. But again, a great reminder that with this open air top, open the windows and everything, you get a feeling that is unlike any other SUV in the market, aside from Ford Bronco. So I'm just driving in a fully electric mode, so there's no engine starting right now. But there is a fair amount of sound still, and this is something that you just have to expect from a Jeep. There is a lot of exterior sound. There is some sound coming from the engine bay, almost like a compressor sound, which is a bit odd because engine shouldn't be running. But what I do find in this Jeep is that as soon as you step on the gas quite briskly, or you turn on the AC or something else, the engine will eventually come on, because there's not much range, first of all, with electric motor, but also the engine will fire up right away when there's not enough power or not enough juice to continue with the journey. So that's something that's a little bit different from the RAV4, which tend to work longer and more consistently as a fully electric vehicle. I'm going to close the window here for a second because it's quite windy here. So let me do that. And what can I say about the driving feel? Well, this is a classic Jeep feel. You feel the ruggedness, you feel kind of a bit bouncy, and it's kind of jittery, but there's no question that you're driving a Jeep and nothing else. And that's exactly what people like about the Wrangler. So I can't really complain, because maybe it's not for me in a sense that this is a bit jittery and the ride is pretty unstable. But so many people love this Jeep Wrangler for that particular reason. You might get a bit frustrated driving this Jeep, especially on the highway, because it can get quite bumpy when the road is not smooth. And those are some compromises you just have to learn to live with if you were to buy a Jeep. Now, having said all that, I think the plug-in hybrid still works really well, and it's a good feeling that you're not using any gas when you're driving in this mode. And so overall, you're still going to save fuel, you're going to save a cost, and that is one big advantage of this Jeep. I think they're selling a lot more of this plug-in hybrid than expected, for good reason, because a lot of people just don't want to spend money anymore, but they also don't want to buy a fully electric vehicle. So the advantage of something like this is that if you do run out of juice or you run out of battery for the fully electric mode, well, it just becomes a normal hybrid vehicle, and that means you can continue to drive and just fill up the gas and keep on moving, and you don't have to worry about being stranded on the road. So there is no range anxiety with this style. Now, coming back to talk about the Toyota 4Runner and the next generation version of it, do I think that they will introduce the plug-in hybrid at some point? That's very possible, but as I mentioned earlier, I really think the 4Runner will start with a format very similar to the 2024 Tacoma, which means 2.4 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine with and without hybrid, but no plug-in hybrid. And therefore it's going to really maximize the fuel efficiency only through the hybrid system, but you wouldn't be able to drive in the fully electric mode like you can with the Wrangler. So that would be the one big difference if the 4Runner stays true to what Tacoma has become. But in terms of drivability, what I can say is that I don't think Toyota will design something that is close to Jeep in terms of feel, because they wouldn't want to make the 4Runner feel too rugged and too bouncy and too jittery like this, because their buyers are going to be more of a city or highway users, less like off-road users, and therefore I expect the 4Runner to have a similar mannerism and feel as what the new Tacoma will be, which means it will be very street friendly, and once again, not as off-road feeling as something like a Jeep Wrangler. I think the Jeep has evolved over time. It's definitely smoother and much quieter and much more comfortable than it used to be, but it still has that classic Jeep feel in terms of both the city driving and also highway driving. But I fully expect the new generation 4Runner to be more of a city/highway vehicle and with less focus on off-roading than something like a Jeep. But that's something that we'll have to just figure out. For now, what I can say is that I truly enjoy the experience of driving a Jeep like this because of the open top, because of the truck feel, because of setting up nice and tall, and also the fact that this is very configurable and very customizable to how you want your vehicle to look like and feel like on the road. And that is something that most vehicles or most SUVs do not offer at this point. Do I look forward to seeing the all-new 4Runner at some point? Absolutely. But I also admit that the current version of the 4Runner, which I've owned many versions of it, is absolutely fantastic, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, except maybe it's not as fuel efficient as newer models. And I have to admit that the current generation 4Runner is actually the classic SUV, body-on-frame SUV that you might want to buy and keep for many, many years to come, because it is so reliable and it will remain so reliable because it's still built in Japan with a proven powertrain. So that's my basic summary of what's happening with the Jeep Wrangler compared to the upcoming Toyota 4Runner, and also my general comment and review and audit of this Jeep. What do you guys think of the Jeep Wrangler? What do you guys think of this plug-in hybrid model? And do you think Toyota will eventually come up with a 4Runner that can truly compete with the Wrangler and the Ford Bronco? Let me know in the comments below your thoughts. I would love to hear from you. If you have questions, please put that in the comment section as well. I try to get to it as much as I can. And if you enjoyed my video, I would appreciate it if you can give me a thumbs up and make some comments as I mentioned. And if you haven't done so yet, would you kindly subscribe to my channel? But until next video, I'm signing off for now. Thank you so much.